Well, thank you very much. It's actually a really good topic, and I like innovation. In fact, I actually love innovation. And innovation to me is all about making things better. It's about changing the world and making the world a better place. And my story kind of came back many years ago. It was about 2009. And I got an iPhone, and it was the 3GS. And I saw it, and I went through the App Store. And the App Store at the time had a lot of very gimmicky apps. There was a lot of ones like little silly gimmicky ones like little Trivial Pursuit, and just little, very basic games and very basic apps. And I saw that there weren't a lot of brands on it. And I thought, this is just amazing. Coca-Cola isn't on this, McDonald's isn't on this, none of the big brands are actually on this. But I thought could be such a powerful thing. So what I did was I thought, why don't I try to just pitch a few ideas to a few different companies, I pitched it to a few different ad agencies, I pitched it to a few brands, and just said, look, we can do a couple of things for you. And we went to a company called Rip Curl, which is a Australian surfing brand down in Torquay, down in Victoria. And we went to them and we said, look, we can do 3 different concepts. One is where you actually see what the surf is like at your normal sort of beach, your local beach that you go to. Or there's another idea, we could have your tide chart and the moon chart and all that data that they've actually got for the next 20 years. So it's very, very easy. Or the other idea is we can make a surfing game. And straight away they said, oh, we really like a surfing game. And I thought, well, how on earth do we make a surfing game? I've actually never built a game before, I've never built an app. How on earth do we do it? And we kind of just winged it. We just, pitched the idea and said, this could be a really good way that you can demonstrate all the new clothes, or the new wetsuits, or the new surfboards that are coming out in the next couple of seasons. We can all put in the app. So it's like a catalogue, and you can, change characters, and you can choose your surfboard, the wind levels, etc., etc. And anyway, they so didn't believe in the idea. They thought it was an absolute gimmick. They thought it was a little bit of a sort of a waste of time, and what's really the purpose of this, and why are people going mobile? It doesn't really seem to make sense. Anyway, they were so unconvinced, they gave us a profit share. They said, look, just have 50%, just have it. And we said, no. And anyway, they just kept going and going. So then anyway, we finally took it, and within the first day it made $12,000 in a day, and it's just been continual revenue sort of from there. So because of that, we work with Rip Curl, we work with a lot of other surfing brands, and now we've done about 40 apps for different companies like Uniden, other ones like Reebok, Lacoste, etc. So it's been quite an interesting journey, but it's always something that innovation is always at the heart of it, and there's always a solution. And I like being involved at the early stage of business. It's exciting. It's a little bit more. Being in a growing industry is just one of those ones where you just really can get the excitement, you get some really good stuff. So when we first did apps, there was about 5 other companies who did apps as well, whereas now obviously there's a lot more. And we kind of knew, we sort of had the same sort of group of things, we kind of had the same kind of ideas, but we just didn't know where it was going to go. Now apps are obviously, there's some very, very smart business models that are around it. You've got ones like Uber, which is totally changing taxi industry. It's completely disrupting the industry, and I think disruption is very similar to innovation, and I think they're very similar. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about disruption models. I want to talk about how apps are changing the world, and I really do believe that it's not so much the mobile phone that was the big revolution, because that's been around for over 30 years. It's when the App Store came in, that's only been around for 6 years, and yet WhatsApp got bought out for $17 billion. I mean, that's more than mining companies. That's more than, some of the biggest brands in the world. It's just incredible for an app to be actually worth that much. And since I've been on the journey, I've written the book, How Apps Are Changing the World. And I worked with a few different ones, and I really wanted to find out why some apps are successful and why other ones are duds. And I tried to find sort of an eclectic group of people. So I found the guy from Disney Mobile. He set up a game called Where's My Water? And pretty much Disney said to him, they said, look, if this is a good idea, great, let's promote it, let's get on behind it. But he had very limited funds, and he really had to try to prove to all the senior board directors that this is where the future's going. And because of that, it was quite an interesting guy to interview. We also interviewed people from Crispin Porter and Bogusky, which is sort of an ad agency over in Colorado, Saatchi & Saatchi in New York, who was the head of innovation there. And I started to realise there are three things that do make a successful app. One, does it save you time? Does it save you money? Or is it entertaining? If it's entertaining, it has to be very competitive and you're competing with a very big audience. You're competing with stuff like Angry Birds and very, very slick business models. If it's saving you money, then it doesn't have to be the most amazing designed app. I mean, it can even have bugs on it. It doesn't really matter because you're actually saving money. So if it's like you save $7 at the Bowser, people can justify paying 99 cents for that app. If it's saving time, if you pick up a coffee quicker, people are also either willing to pay for it or get behind it, and it's saving time. Since then, we've actually been working with a documentary filmmaker at the moment, and this is the promo. Maybe the internet's not on.
Go UTS WTA.
And that's what's good about innovation. So how are apps changing the world? More has changed in the last 18 months than the last 18 years. And leading the way are apps. You know the small square on your smartphone? It's not just an app. It's a revolution. It's estimated the global app market will exceed $38 billion by 2015. Recent global figures show there's nearly 30 million mobile internet connections in Australia and nearly 100 million apps being downloaded each month. Just recently, Apple reported the 50 billionth download from its App Store, which has over 1.2 million apps. And they're not just for phones and tablets. They're now being designed for our televisions, cars, and even clothes. In this series, we set out to find how apps are changing the way we communicate, we educate, and create, and how it's become an essential part of our lives. So that was one of the pictures we did. So that's a sort of a 5-part documentary series that we're actually looking into. And pretty much once you get the movement and the momentum of everything, you're just slowly progressing every single time, things start to happen. So because of doing this this promo one, there's been a lot of other companies who want to be involved with us, and there's a lot of companies that want to promote their apps as part of the documentary series. It's done a lot of stuff that's also been quite very interesting as well. I did one of these zero gravity flights, which was a parabolic plane, so it just basically goes up and down, and during the time you experience exactly what it's like to be in space. And this was done over in Palo Alto, and probably not the cheapest thing to do, but it was quite an experience. So I did that with the editor of Wired magazine, and that actually turned out to be quite a good one. So in terms of the business and the business that I'm sort of in, it is apps, but then at the same time, it's actually anything that's innovation. So a couple of good examples that I like for innovation was the one for James Cameron. So there was a big problem with the privacy and copyright issues that are happening with films at the moment. And pretty much since the GFC, films have actually been sort of losing money at record rates. Actually, at the moment, it's actually the lowest amount for 17 years in terms of the box office. So in terms of to be able to combat that through innovation, James Cameron decided to get into 3D films, because although you can't stop people from downloading it, it's just such a better experience paying that little bit more, actually going to the cinema and experiencing it in 3D. So these are the types of innovation. You've got sustaining, evolutionary, revolutionary, which is kind of radical, and disruptive. So in terms of the last 38 years, that's how long it's taken to hit 50 million users. Television, 13 years. Internet, 4 years. iPod, 3 years. Facebook, it took 9 months to get 100 million. And then iPhone apps is obviously the most exponential growth that we've seen so far. One of the top apps in the US at the moment, is probably in the top 5, is one called Pandora. And that's a very disruptive model against the radio industry and internet radio in general. The company's worth millions and millions of dollars and got 100 million monthly active users in the US, 250 million weekly US radio listeners to internet radio, that's in general, which is pretty amazing for a population of only about 300 million. It's quite incredible. And that's actually what they made in their third quarter. So it's quite substantial. So, and then obviously there's other ones. You've got ones like iHeartRadio. You've got, there's a whole heap of other ones that are very similar. But it was a disruption model. So don't actually be afraid of disruption. There's nothing wrong with polarizing yourself. You'll either, when you're doing something very radical, very big and disruptive, you'll either be loved or hated. Uber was absolutely hated by the taxi industry. Especially over in the UK, they had a big strike and they just went totally against Uber and they tried to shut it down. They've had legal cases, legal battles, and now it's worth about 17 billion. And investors like Richard Branson has been involved, and he's actually sort of chipped in a bit of money too as well to actually fund the business. There's always 3 stages, I feel, of business. I think it's stage 1, 2 and 3. Stage 1 is something new, radical, startup. It's doing something on a shoestring, it's pulling strings from everywhere. Stage 2, you've got systems in place, it's running like a normal business, whether it's a small business or large business, still runs as a business. And then the third one is when you get into the IPO, when you've got board of directors, etc., etc. And certain people like stage 1. There's a certain type of sort of maverick or rebellious type who likes stage 1, but then they get a bit bored in stage 2 and it's just not as exciting. It's a bit more, sort of sales teams and, it's more about, having a normal structure. And then there's a lot of people who like stage 3 where it's very secure and it's quite a large business and it's got a lot of security. So I also believe that another good way of saying innovation is taking risks and breaking the rules. And they're the 2 things that companies hate. In fact, companies do procedures and avoiding risks. So innovation will come from the next generation coming through. It will come from individuals. It will come from smaller companies, more nimble companies, who actually can challenge things and can take much, much bigger risks. So the generation we're in at the moment is moving from owning products to accessing experiences. It's more about now with user experience, it's more about opinions that people make is from everything from the webinar, from the videos, from the blog, from their Facebook channel, from their social media things. They're all about the overall experience of the way you feel about the product and the way you feel about that particular brand. So within the airline industry, they're spending an enormous amount of money on the user experience. And actually user experience is one of the top jobs at the moment. It's actually very high. UI/UX designer is one of the highest ones at the moment, especially for the mobile space. And it's all about the touch points from every single thing. As soon as you arrive in the lounge at Virgin, from the time you get onto the plane, by the time you look at the app, by the time you look at a whole range of ones. So a good example was Qantas spent millions of dollars putting an iPad in every single set, like in every single seat. And Virgin said, well, everyone's already got an iPhone, everyone's already got an iPad, why don't we just make the app and just give them the content so everyone just looks on their own device? And that was sort of a way that was a much cheaper and smarter way of doing things. The future is never valued, unfortunately. That's the old dilemma. That's probably more of dealing with an ad agency. I think that's the very typical client brief and the client budget. But the future is never valued, unfortunately. So with anything you do have to kind of prove that whatever your business or product is going to be viable and it's going to be worth a lot more. And there's a lot of proving that needs to go on like that. Focus on making a great product. There's a lot of people that I speak to and they talk all about, is it scalable? Is it, can we build a business model into it? Is there a way we can, gain more sales, etc., etc. At the end of the day, a really great app, a really great business. At the end of the day, it is all about having an amazing product, and I think there's always room in the marketplace for something better. So even if there's another app on the App Store that, say you've had an idea for an app and you have a look on the App Store and there's already another one available, it's actually not a big difference. I always believe there's always something that you can do to improve it. In fact, I'd actually be a bit worried if you do have an idea and there's no one else that's already done it. That's probably a little bit more unusual. Do something you're passionate about. A lot of people say they're passionate about certain things and they start losing a bit of passion, but the passion is the thing that really, really drives you, that you will probably go to exponential length to actually do it. It will pull you along through working till 4 in the morning. It will make an enormous difference if you are actually passionate about it. As soon as you lose the passion, and a lot of times with businesses, from stage 1, it goes into stage 2, and a lot of people start losing sort of passion within stage 2 or stage 3. They start losing a lot of it in what they're all about in the first place. Jump the curve. So this is an interesting concept. Jump the curve is all about trying to find the next big thing. So what it would be like is the printing press to laser printing to 3D printing. So every time you're jumping the curve, or it might be something like floppy disks to USB drives to cloud. When you jump the curve, you don't have to have the most amazing thing. And there's a guy, Rob Kiyosaki, and he has a funny line for it. He says, "Don't worry, be crappy." And what he talks about with that is that you don't have to have an amazing one in the marketplace if you're jumping the curve. You're just basically doing something that's so revolutionary. And he also talks about just don't make things 10% better. Grow fast or die slow. It's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. And this is something that's quite a big thing too, because anytime there's an idea that people have, I don't think I can compete with the biggest companies, because there's always bigger companies in all different parts of the world. I don't think I can go cheaper, because there's always a lot of other companies and businesses in different parts of the world that can always go cheaper. But in terms of one thing that I do like to move on, and I do like to compete on, that's speed, because I can move much, much faster. So I'm actually working, consulting to the government at the moment, and I can assure you that things are starting to change a little bit more. There's a lot of processes that happen, and things are starting to, speed up a lot more. I think in terms of getting a business up and running, any ideas you've got, come up with a name as quickly as possible. I like to do 2-syllable names for things. For some reason, it just seems to just go better. Optus, Telstra, Google, Yahoo, it's all two-syllable words. If it's 1 syllable, it's sort of almost like, there's a film called Drift, which is an Australian film with Sam Worthington, and it's always like, drift what? Drift the movie, So I find that that's something that works. I also find that you've got to just quickly see if the domain name's available. It's best to get a .com. Then get a trademark. It costs about $120. Get a trademark, set it up. As soon as you get a trademark, you can put the TM straight away. And then once it's registered, it can take up to a year, depending. You can put the registered symbol, the R or the circle around it. Get the trademark. It's probably lasts for about 10 years. It's a relatively small investment, but you can add a lot of value when you're selling the business or getting investment capital. It also makes a little bit of a difference too. It also protects you a little bit in certain circumstances. So worth getting a trademark, and it doesn't take long. It probably takes about maybe half an hour to set up a company. You can set up now a company, and it can take within 72 hours. You can start trading with 200 countries within 72 hours. To set up a business is faster now than it's ever been before. Setting up a website is faster than ever before. I personally just get a theme from Theme Forest, find the one that's the closest to it, design as much of the stuff as you can, get all the images and just replace all the images, and then basically give it to a coder to quickly slice it up and get all the functionality that you want, and then get it up and running as quickly as possible. I don't think it should take you more than a couple of hours to set up a website, but by actually doing that, you're actually making a bit of a mark. So I do believe in moving very, very fast, and it's not a case of size and scale. It's purely about speed. So just a question out here. Who sort of runs a business on the side? Is there anyone here who's got a business on the side?
Kind of. I have all the domain names and everything, but it's a charity, not a
Charity.
business.
And like in terms of, is there anyone like their hands up that are wanting to start a business or a product, a brand? A few nods there. It's actually now there's more and more times. I remember many years ago it was a case of people either had a job or they worked for themselves. Whereas I'm finding more and more people, they've got a lot of things going on. They've got a blog they run, they've got a little fashion thing on the side, they've got a little app idea, there's a lot of other things now, but yet they've also still got a job as well. And I think there's a lot of things to say too about being a baker. That was pretty much your profession for 20 years. You were a baker and you worked as a baker, and as long as you were the only one in town, you'd actually have a pretty good business. Now it's all about launching everything. Now it's about having the whole channels, the whole array of things. It's not just about having a bakery anymore, and people will actually travel further. Don't be afraid to start small. So this was the first Walmart store, which opened in 1962. That was just a little corner store. But it just really goes to show that you've got to start somewhere, and don't be too put off if it doesn't seem like it's a really big deal. And now that's one of the biggest businesses in the world. It's good to have incentives. I like to give myself incentives, and I like to give my friends incentives and the people I work with incentives. I actually believe it makes people strive that little bit further. It makes people go to extra length. I think when we got the profit share for the Rip Curl game, because we had an incentive, a profit share, I think that probably made us work that little bit harder and that little bit longer. So I definitely think it is good to have incentives. And it's quite a funny story actually. There's a friend of mine, and he was writing a book, and he was writing at a very similar time to me, and he said, I want to finish it by my birthday. And it was in a couple of months, and I said, okay, I'll give you $1,000 if you can finish it by your birthday, but you have to absolutely finish, send it off to the printers, and that's it. You can't make any more changes. That's the rule. So anyway, I struck a bet. I struck a bet with him, and then I have never seen a guy work so hard in my life. He got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He was just working all the way through, and I thought to myself, what on earth have I done? What on earth have I done? Anyway, it came to the end of the 3 months. He worked very, very hard. He didn't quite finish. And so I said to him, I said, look, you do kind of owe me the $1,000, but I won't actually get it from you. But if you're a bestseller, I'll be chasing that very, very hard. Another good one about incentives is, do you guys know Fitbit at all? One of these little things? So basically, they're very similar. There's another one called Jawbone, and there's a whole range of other different ones that do something very similar. But it's quite a smart sort of little thing. It's very cheap. It only costs maybe about $1.50 to produce. The actual device in that you can probably get from China very, very cheap, and it just basically syncs it up with your mobile. And it's just a bit of rubber around it, really, at the end of the day. It sells for $127. It's doing extremely well at the moment. But what it does is when it connects to the app, there's one called MyFitnessPal, which is all about putting your food and calories in for the day. And then you've got other ones that all sync up to the same one, and then you've got the Fitbit app. And what it does is it gives you little sort of incentives. So say if you want to say, I don't know, lose a couple of kilograms or whatever, you put in the amount you want to lose, and then it tells you the amount of calories you need to sort of take in order to start losing weight over a short period of time. You put in your water, you put in, etc., etc. So, and then once you've actually achieved it for the day, it gives you a little buzz, and it sort of buzzes and gives a little trigger. But what I've found is, because of that, we've done a bit of an innovation project with a company over in Hong Kong, which is an industrial design company. And what actually we've done with them is we said, wouldn't it be good to actually have a jar that's got a lock on it, and you can put anything you want in the jar. It's like an incentives jar or your vices or whatever. And any time that you've finished your goals for the day, then it opens up, but you can't access it before you've achieved your goals for the day, whether it's 1,000 calories or, you know, certain 20,000 steps or something like that, then the thing unlocks. So what we're producing is a sort of a jar, like a cookie jar, and you put a sort of a cookie in at the beginning of the week or whatever, and if you want to have it, well, you've got to start, you know, walking a lot. You can put a chocolate bar in, you could put, you know, a coffee pod, just pretty much any of the devices you could actually put it in. So that's something that we're working at the moment, and then we're pitching it up on Kickstarter. And that's the end of that one. So the thing I'd say, so how on earth did it get to this stage so quickly in regards to the app? This is basically Apple and the start of the App Store. So it was in 2000 that the first phones were produced, and those phones actually didn't make it to Australia. That was the very first generation. They didn't make it to Australia. This is from Steve Ballmer, who's the CEO. There's no chance the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. No chance. So he wasn't a believer in it. So this was the official date, 10th of July 2008, and there were 550 apps when the app first launched. Now I think it's 1.2 million apps on the App Store now, and on the Google Android marketplace is a very similar number as well. So that was when the App Store opened in Australia in July 2008. We got in about 2009. For the first year, it didn't seem to be much of a big thing at all. There was a lot of very, very primitive, simple, basic apps. And then 2011, 50 million people have iPhones. So this is in 2011, 43% of Australians currently own a smartphone. Half of the smartphone users access the web every day, and mobile internet adoption will overtake desktop in 3 years. And I think that was actually done much bigger, actually, much bigger. So this is where the high penetration of the mobile usage is. So as you can see, you know, Sweden's very high, England's very high, Italy's very high, Australia's relatively high. So in regards to the other ones, it sort of found that what was happening in a lot of countries is the infrastructure for the internet wasn't very good. So what was happening was you could only grow as fast as the infrastructure around you grew. Recently I was over in India, and I found that everyone had mobile phones. They almost skipped the whole internet and just went straight to mobile phones. And the reason why is because the plan was very cheap. It was about $9 a month. So here it's about maybe $90, maybe $100 a month, something. Much cheaper. Just China Mobile, you know, has 300 million people subscribed to their China Mobile connection. So that's more people than that got over the US, just connected to one. So it's all really about getting as many people as possible so the price comes down. That's why the prices are a little bit higher in Australia. In terms of who's buying the apps, a lot of the mobile gamers are the sort of male, but the female gamers are also quite large as well. That's quite a decent number. So what actually happened with PlayStation and Xbox was the market was sort of people in their 20s, males in their 20s and 30s, and it was a very high sort of market share within that sort of realm. With apps now, it's a much larger one where it comes to the sort of female market, where it's getting onto a train or doing something as you're, you know, listening to music, etc., etc. There's a lot of games that work around social gaming, etc. So what's actually happening now with Sony PlayStation is only recently in China those gaming devices are now allowed. So now the Japanese company is just flogging them all into they know that the future is going to be either iPads, tablets, or phones. Why you need an app? I personally think everyone now is starting to move down that path, and I'm starting to find that websites, for me, are starting to get a little bit harder to get promotion for and marketing for. It's harder to get PR for another website. There's also, it's very fiddly, and just doesn't seem to attract the same attention as an app is doing. So there's a category for every brand, and there's a lot more brands now. And this is a branded app is powerful when it has experience, originality, longevity, and usefulness. So then my three tips. So an example would be maybe 20% off a pizza or a movie. Save your time. You jump straight to the front of the queue. And something like entertainment might be an Audi racing game or a 889 claims app. These are when it doesn't work, and they don't really run businesses. They're difficult to share. More than 10,000 iPhone apps were downloaded in the first 3 days and 60 million in the first month. So the actual scale, Microsoft in '99 was the biggest company in the world in terms of market share and brand value, and we took it over in 2012. If Apple was a country, it would be the GDP number 20. In terms of it, it's pretty interesting to know that Apple, which is a computer company, makes almost half of its revenue purely just from the iPhone, and including all the tablets and devices is about 3/4. So you can actually see their actual main business with computers only 14%. So I actually remember there was a very interesting article which was saying that one of the big reasons why Apple funded the iPod was because they wanted to sell more computers, because people love their iPods so much, they fell in love with the Apple brand and therefore started using all the other devices as well, and started using and getting to be able to buy more computers. But now you can see the iPod's only a very small number now. So yes, they are kind of the new website, and I think if you do have a website, it has to be responsive. There's nothing worse than seeing a website you have to start zooming in. It's very hard to get around, doesn't navigate very well, or it uses Flash, or it uses something that doesn't really make sense. So it is important to keep it responsive. These were just a couple of little apps we've done. So you've got branded apps, or you've got indie app developers. And it's very different in terms of the gaming sector, very different mindset. So something like an indie app developer, one of the guys that I interviewed was a guy in Germany, and he set up one called Doodle Jump, and he set up from his bedroom. He was about 19 at the time, and it's a very simple game where you just have this bird and you have to push it down, and then it sort of does these little jumps. It's actually a pretty cute little game. And anyway, he sold over 6.5 million copies of it and charges 99 cents for the game. Now, if you charge 99 cents, you get around about 69 cents from that, because obviously Apple take a 30% cut, and they translate it in all the different ones. And it just arrives in your account about 2 months afterwards. So as soon as you launch your app on the App Store, and a payment goes in now, you'll probably get the payment in December, and takes a $12 fee by the bank transfer to send it across to you. Then you've got to pay $99 a year to have an iTunes Connect account. And by actually doing that, but then once it's on the App Store, it pretty much can pretty much sit there, and you can flog the hell out of it. And a lot of times it just basically, as soon as you wake up, you go and check all the stats, and you can see if it's going to be a really good day or not. But you sort of find that a lot of the ones, they're very simple, but a lot of those ones are charged. They're 99 cents. They haven't got very slick business models that are involved with them. It's really just about selling a lot of units and making it at that price of 99 cents. Or you've got a lot of the promotions that's done by Rovio, where they do partnership deals, and a lot of times they can actually give away the game for free. And a lot of the sort of indie app developers are finding it more and more competitive to compete, because suddenly now it's very, very hard to compete against some of the ones that are giving away games for free. I mean, I've actually seen so many games that are just incredible 3D games, and it doesn't cost a cent, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of advertising or banner ads on it. This is when it works. It works when you've got budget, technology, and ideas. Ideas can come from anywhere, anytime. There's a lot of people with really great ideas. The technology is already actually available in your phone already. There's a lot of things that it's actually capable of doing. There's a lot of developers in many different parts of the world that decide of the technology. The one where it's the hardest part is the budget part. That's usually 99% of the time that's where it goes wrong. The budget isn't there, or there isn't sufficient funds to actually make it happen. When you do see it work within those three, then that's when it works. And a lot of times, they'll just get a proof of concept. There's a few bits of software you can get. There's one called Axure, and you can create little prototypes. If you do have a really good idea, I'd either get someone who can create a prototype for you, and it probably wouldn't cost that much, and then create a prototype and start seeking sort of investment. Maybe at the beginning, just a small bit of investment at the beginning, just to get it up and running, to get a bit of a sort of a working model ready to go, and then basically try to get a bit of funding. But if you can get that model right, that's when it works. So that's kind of our approach: gain insight, develop a bit of a strategy around the whole business model. We go through the creative services, etc. Then we do the app development, the integrated marketing, and then the analytics. So we use Flurry and iTunes Connect and Google Analytics to give you a bit of a rough thing. When we create any sort of an app, this is the rough format of the wireframes that we create. And what this does, this kind of developers understand this model, clients kind of understand it, and everything kind of makes sense. None of the graphics has been done. It's just saying this is a tab, and when you click on that tab, it'll take you through to this page. Everything, that's probably quite a big one that's sort of like involved with that. But a lot of times it doesn't have to be that. It can just be a drawing, but there just has to be that flow. Instead of getting into the design, people can get very quickly into the design side of things and colours and all that sort of things, whereas I think you've got to really understand the flow, and if you can actually get a user experience guide, they can kind of pull it together very, very quickly, but it does make a lot of sense for the developers. So this was the one when we worked on the Ripco one. So what was the advantage of making it landscape compared to portrait? So portrait would be just a cropped image, so you turn it landscape and there's an advantage for making it landscape. There's nothing worse, I think, than having one that's just the same content in portrait and landscape. So this was the live event, so that's had over 1 million downloads, and that was one where you could stream all the surfing event live. So anywhere you were in the world, you could actually stream the surfing event. So the event down in Bells Beach or the one over in California, you could basically watch it all on your phone. This was a very simple branded app. This was just for a company called Trinity V3, and it was basically like a resource calculator. So you can work out your annual salary based on your, billable hours, etc., etc. This was a concept we did for our quarters. It didn't actually quite go ahead, but I'm quite passionate about seeing Australian brands grow and expand, but then also at the same time, there was a lot of things that we wanted to put into the app, but it didn't quite happen. So put all the specials, promotions. So basically, at around 11 o'clock in the morning, you get a deal that if you take this to any place, you get a free upsize or something like that. And if you actually have the app on your phone, you get a free upsize. And then you can also customize the tabs at the bottom. And then you just all find out. And then all the promotions and the downloads. This was another sort of concept for Stone and Wood Brewery, which is a sort of craft beer base. And that was a very simple one, to try to find what are 5 components that are interesting to them. So for something like that, it would be their brand is very important, where you can find their brand or product, a little bit about the company, some news, which might be very similar content to what they've already got on their website, and maybe a shopping cart. Maybe if they've got merchandise or they've got branded stuff that probably might want to get it out. That was the app icon we showed you there. Then we sort of show just a bit of a mock-up, what it would look like, you know, with the demonstration, and you can basically click on the different ones. They can keep adding to it. There's expanded views, and it talks all about the different hops that are used, etc. And then you've got the shopping cart. And a lot of plugins now actually work very, very efficiently now, and it's very easy to actually sell products on apps. And you've got the beer locator, and then about us, and some news. So that's actually the book that I've recently finished. And actually, if you want to actually show some around, pass a few of them around. So the surfing game, this is actually where it ended up. This was the television ad for it.
And now the search is in your hands.
So that was the promo video for it, and that was released all through their media channels. So every time they had a surfing event that they broadcast through ESPN, they'll basically put it through the same. They'll basically run it through that. So they own a lot of the media that they do, so they can get a lot of airtime for it. But that was an interesting stage of something that was just an idea. It was just such as fragile as an idea, but we just kept going with it. Did as many things as we possibly can. I think there's a lot of pretty interesting new app concepts that I've been thinking about and new models. I think now it is getting to a slightly different model too, in terms of the paid apps are starting to become now free with very smart business models around them, using in-app purchases. There's a lot of other things that are coming out now where they're syncing up to social media and dealing directly with brands, and they're doing a lot of branded content and doing a lot of product placement inside. So this is the actual footage of actually playing the game on your phone. So the time we did this, the 3G was the main phone, and the 3GS was only just started out. There was only about 10% of the market share was the one that had the 3GS. So we had to make a stripped down version and a more premium version for the other one, which could actually handle the computing renders on that one. But that was an interesting one. But there was also, to show you something else. That's the picture when we first started. I was just sitting in a room with a whiteboard, and it was all just pretty much just trying anything really. It was all just a bit of let's just have a go at everything and anything. And since then we've seen some other promotion for other clients. So it's a bit of the promotion and a bit of the PR it's had. Pretty much the main question people ask me is what about Android, or the difference between the Android and the iPhone and Microsoft, etc. And in regards to actually, do you launch on the iPhone or do you launch on the Android? My kind of way on sort of answering that is you just have to have both now. You just have to have both. It's like saying, do you want your product in Woolworths or do you want it in Coles? Well, you probably want both, to be perfectly honest. It works a little bit differently. If you do it for iPhone first, it's very easy to adapt it to the Android later on. If you start off with Android, you almost have to start again when you actually do it for the iPhone. So I tend to find how they're doing at the government at the moment, they're both working on it at the exact same time. The problem with that method, which is probably going to change pretty soon, but that's what they've done sort of already. And why they're doing that, because I think you're working on it at the exact same time, but at the end of the day, it means that if you want to make one change to one button, you have to also make it to the other button. So what happens is they start evolving down their own path, and when you see them side by side, there's a lot of differences between the two. I think it's much easier. Google, there's a chapter in the book called Google Plays Catch Up, and it was just saying that it's much sort of a game of just getting as many apps onto the App Store, so they're making it as easy to convert it across for Android as possible. So just to try to get the same numbers and to compete at the same level. So a lot of times there's a lot of software you can get, and it only takes a couple of days to port it out to Android. But there was a lot of promotion that sort of happened. There was a lot of other, co-branding. So Virgin Blue, they funded about $20,000 towards the app. There was a lot of other companies that we sort of had on board with clothes and different sort of manufacturing, and there was a lot of extra things that happened. You get to meet some pretty interesting people as well, and traveling to California and traveling to Portugal, and so it was a pretty good experience. But I kind of believe now that this is the best time if you do have any sort of innovative ideas or anything like that. Now is the easiest time that's ever been, and I believe that if you really want to change the world, it has never been a better time than to start today and to start now. Absolutely. Thanks, guys.